Hi, I'm Ken Burkett. We're here on down on Pickering Street at the Judge Elijah Heath House, which is a Pennsylvania historical noted place because Judge Heath was involved in the Underground Railroad in Jefferson County. And this passageway that's in front of me and through behind me was discovered in 1910 during a remodeling of the house. And the local legend is that this passageway is part of the Underground Railroad in Brookville.
I think it was in the early 20th century, Mr. Matson was enlarging the house just a half a block down the street on Pickering, and he found a false wall in his basement. And when he opened up, he had a tunnel leading from his well house into his basement. You know, there are a lot of stories. People believe every coal chute is an underground road stop. You know, some people think of railroads running through tunnels, and that's not right. The way the network existed through this area, I mean, they were moving these people after dark. You try walking after dark, you only can get about 5 miles, 6 miles maybe. So from here, as I understand it, they would go to Sigel and then across the Clarion and gradually work their way up to Canada where they'd be free. The English had abolished slavery long before we did.
We conducted excavations here with a high school group in association with a Keystone grant under the Pennsylvania State Museum Commission and the Jefferson County History Center. And part of that was to discover and uncover what the real meaning of this passageway is, and maybe dispel part of the legend of the Underground Railroad. This house was built by Judge Elijah Heath. He lived here. He also had a farm in Somerville. And this particular passageway wasn't built to have slaves or runaway slaves transported and hidden through. Behind me is a well, and the house was built in 3 phases. The first phase is almost directly above my head, and prior to that there was a root cellar just ahead of me here that's stone lined, and it was probably used to store dry good foods in for the household use, and there was probably a trap floor and a set of stairs coming down through the floor to that cellar. Well, as the house expanded, the well behind me was covered over and the well house was torn down. There was an ordinance in Brookville that the wells had to be covered with a structure after a cow fell down the well next door here, actually. And an ordinance was produced to make all the wells in Brookville have a covered building over them so the animals and people couldn't fall down in them. So when the house expanded, that well building, which was made out of these bricks, was torn down. And if you look behind me, you can see that they're still a little bit more than waist high. But a passageway was cut through the house, below the house. And behind me, there's a set of stairs that would have come down through from the original kitchen of the house to the well. And then people could have traversed this particular passageway to still reach the root cellar. So it was a path of convenience to let people still utilize these 2 things down here. When this passageway was discovered in 1910, there was a cutway or a pathway cut through from a door that was installed here into the passageway, and you can see where these bricks were cut, and the dirt floor is still in existence right here. So what we found, we had about 10 to 12 inches of soil that had accumulated down here over the years. The floors are still dirt on both sides of us here. And there were a number of household remains. There was a little bit of ceramic ware. There was seeds. There was some bone fragments. But nothing that would have, told the story of the Underground Railroad. What would you expect? These people would have been traveling light. And we know that they probably weren't coming into Brookville. Elijah Heath had a farm in Heathville. We know he was involved in the Underground Railroad, but it would have been more logical for him to keep these runaways on his farm and then transport him north to Corsica, Sigel, and more rural communities to move them out of town and head them north towards Canada.
but Judge Heath was an avowed abolitionist. And when several slaves were apprehended up in Venango, Venango tried to stop them legally. That didn't work, so the slave catcher brought them down to Brookville, put them in the old jail, which sat right beside the courthouse. The slave catcher went over and took a room at the American House, which is just across the alley. And that night, by some strange coincidence, the jailer was absent, and some people went up the alley and broke into the jail and got those guys out of there. And the slave catcher went nuts, tried to hire people to, help them hunt them down with hounds and so on, and they never found him. The guy finally went back to Virginia. We feel that Heath was involved, and then, of course, the feds caught up with him, and they charged him with aiding and abetting. And the document that comes to us was actually kind of an appeal down in Pittsburgh, but they went through all the evidence, so we have a good line of what happened, and so he was fined pretty heavily. But the judge basically issued a warning at the end that because he was an associate judge, that didn't give him the right to make up his own law. Imagine that. That would never happen today.